So, let's get started. I'd like to welcome everybody today to our Lunch in the Garden Zoom, here again on a Wednesday. We're coming into the end of May now, and lots of things happening out in the garden, lots of things going on. So we're glad that everybody has joined us here again today. My name is David Chinnery. I work for Cornell Cooperative Extension of Rensselaer County. Also here today we have Marcy Vanaka of our office. She does all sorts of different things. I was going to rattle off her titles, but she's a communications expert, an administrative assistant, a jack of all trades, and she's going to be keeping an eye on the chat box. So if you have questions today, you want to type them into the chat box and we'll answer all the questions at the end. And of course, our guest speaker today is Joellen Lampman, our good friend from the New York State IPM program. And Joellen has a great diverse background in all sorts of different aspects of biology, wildlife, insects, turf even. So she's really a great resource and a great person that has learned a lot about ticks and has really become our go-to person for ticks here in New York State with the IPM program and Cornell Cooperative Extension. So we're really glad to have Joellen here, and we'll let you take it away, Joellen.
All right, thank you very much. Glad to be here. Can't say too much about ticks, and part of that is because there is so much misinformation out there. So this first slide I like to show, I call this my credibility slide, because I hear so many people giving bad information. And my favorite was when somebody approached me after a presentation and says, oh, that's pretty good, but you need to stop telling people this because that's not right. This being that ticks aren't in the woods, which hopefully everybody knows that they are in the woods in spades. And I partly know this because here I am in the woods holding a mouse, blowing mouse fur, looking for ticks. And if you had told me as I was growing up that that was what I was going to end up doing with my life, I would have said you were crazy. But life takes us in all kinds of crazy directions, doesn't it? So the information that I'm going to be presenting today, a lot of this is going to come from our sponsor, the New York State Senate Task Force on Lyme and Tick-borne Diseases. A number of years ago, they were providing some money to support research and educational programs. So we got a lot of that education money, which allowed us to buy a graphic designer. We had a claymation video that was produced. And we really put this whole program together. And what we're looking to do really is to reduce people's exposure to tick-borne diseases. Because not getting bit by a tick is one thing, but we really want to make sure that people aren't getting sick by the pathogens that these ticks pass along. And we really wanted to make this information easily understood and available to all kinds of age groups. So today we're going to talk about ticks, their biology and their ecology. Then we're going to talk about some prevention through integrated pest management, and then we'll spend right at the end some time on proper removal of ticks, because this is where a lot of the misinformation and sometimes dangerous information can come from. The main thing that I want to get across today is that you do not want to get bit by ticks. So we're trying to prevent tick bites. So with this biology information, we're going to learn about why they're biting, how they're biting. So we'll start off with they are blood-feeding ectoparasites. Ecto meaning that they're on the outside. So one myth is that ticks will actually fully embed inside of people, and that's just not true. Basically, it's just this part of their body right here, just this mouth part that gets inserted, and we'll see a better picture of that later. These guys are sneaky. They're so good at what they do. They've been around since the dinosaurs. So they are masters of stealth. They're small creatures that have really tiny feet here, and they walk on their toes. So some people are like, oh, I can always feel them walking on me. Well, sometimes if they hit a hair on your leg and they might trigger a nerve ending to fire, but you can't count on feeling them crawling up you because they have evolved over the millennia to make sure that you don't feel them crawling up. Those legs are made for crawling. So another myth is that they're going to drop out of trees. They have an amazing capacity to hang on to their energy. So they are not using that energy to walk to the trunk of a tree, to walk up it, to walk out onto a branch so that they can drop down. Nope, what they're doing is they are questing, and I'll show you a picture of that after I tell you that worldwide there's about 1,000 different types of ticks, just a few hundred here in North America. And in New York, we're really only concerned about 3 of them that have been proven to be an impact on human health, livestock, and companion animals. So these are the 3 that we're really concerned about. So starting from the left, the American dog tick is the one that if you're of a certain age, we grew up with this one. It's really big compared to the other ticks. Only the adults get on people. And typically they really like to embed along the hairline, and when they're allowed to stay and fully engorged, they can get to be about the size of grapes. And most of the time now when we see that, we're seeing that they fell off of our dog, and we find them on the floor and they're just big and gray and disgusting, and reminds us that there are ticks that are out there. They're still around. They're very active right now, but we consider this to be kind of our quaint tick because they're so big. They're easy to spot, and there's a low risk of them passing along a pathogen that's going to cause the disease. Our up-and-coming tick is the Lone Star tick. So these are now firmly established on Long Island. They are moving up the Hudson Valley. The farthest north that we know that they're breeding is in Rockland County. But we will find them here because they will be transported on migrating birds. So sometimes we will find these in the Capital District. So it's something to look out for. And then there's the black-legged tick. So this is and has been a problem for about 20 years now in the Capital District area. They're smaller than all of the others just to make them that much harder for them to find. And I'm going to spend most of my time talking about the black-legged tick today. Their new and upcoming ticks I just want to mention briefly is this Asian longhorn tick. This one was found in 2018 in New Jersey on a sheep farm, and they figured out what it was, and that it was this, it came in, we're not even sure how it entered the country. And then we started looking for it. So in 2019, we realized that it's in all of these states, and you can see the colors on the map. And so here in New York, it's in 7 counties. And the interesting thing about this particular tick is that here's your word of the day, parthenogenic. It doesn't need a male in order to reproduce. So a female can clone herself and lay about 2,000 viable eggs. So there's a real possibility that this could take off very quickly. Where it comes from, it's going to do just fine here. So this is one we're watching on. The good news, and why I'm not spending too much time on it, is so far none that have been tested here in the United States have been found to be carrying any pathogens that cause diseases, and they also don't particularly like people. So we're going to hope that those 2 things hold, and I'm sure you'll be hearing about this all over the news because nobody's talking about murder hornets anymore. All right, ticks, they're very, very small. So this is the black-legged tick. From left to right, we've got what comes out of the egg. This is the larva stage. It almost fits in the groove of a fingerprint. So very hard to find on yourself, kind of ups that ante in taking preventative measures to make sure that they can actually reach skin and be able to attach. The next one is the nymph. This is the one that's incredibly active right now for scale. It's the size of a poppy seed. So these are out in huge numbers. They can pass along pathogens, so we need to be very careful. And then going farther to the right, we have the male dog tick adult and the female, black-legged tick, the male and the female. And the female is about the size of a sesame seed. Now, because it's been so cool, we are still seeing these around. So we've got the nymphal black-legged ticks are active, the adult black-legged ticks are active, and we've got the American dog ticks. And the way that they hunt is what we call questing. So they're not climbing up trees and falling out, they're not jumping, they're climbing up to the top of vegetation, and typically this is going to be about shin height, definitely below the knee. They go up and they hold out their front legs and they just wait. And they're waiting for something to come and brush by, and then they can grab onto it. And then once they get onto the body, they're going to keep crawling up, and they're looking for that dark, moist place where they want to spend their feeding time. So dark, moist places, use your imagination. These are the areas that we want to protect. I just want to mention the Lone Star ticks, because we do occasionally see these, and this will be a problem whether it's 10 years from now, 20 years from now, they're coming. They are more active hunters, so they are more likely to come and actively hunt for a host. Incredibly attracted to carbon dioxide. So if I'm down on Long Island and I specifically want to catch these guys, I'm going to look along roadsides and along the edges of parking lots, because the carbon dioxide is coming out of the tailpipes of the cars and it's attracting these ticks. And the larvae, when they come out of the eggs, you can get them in huge numbers. This particular tick can lay 8,000 eggs at a time. So if you walk through an area where they've all just hatched out, like I did here on this golf course, you can see that there's just a few hundred there, and there's more on the back of my leg. All right, ticks are seasonal. As I mentioned a few times, now is the time. It's spring, and we're seeing the nymphs that are out. But the way the life cycle of this works is that the eggs are laid in the springtime, and then they're going to hatch out into that really small six-legged larva that fits in the groove of a fingerprint. And then they're going to wait, and they're going to wait out the rest of the summer, the fall, the winter, and now they're emerging as nymphs in the springtime. They're going to feed, they're going to wait through the rest of spring, summer, and a good portion of fall. The adults are going to become very active. So one myth is that ticks are a summer issue. With the black-legged ticks, they're going to be most active in the spring and in the fall. Then after the adults feed, the female is going to wait out the rest of the fall, the winter, and then she's going to lay her eggs in the spring for it to all start off again. And that would be fine, except they don't read the books. So depending on the year, this can get really, really, really messy. And so right now, even though the adults are supposed to be active in the fall, they're still active now because of the cool, moist weather that we've had has allowed them to survive. I have found larvae in May. So these are ones that they hatched out in August, and they survived almost the entire year. They're really, really good at hanging on to their energy. Throughout the winter, if the adults didn't find a host to feed on, they're going to be active all winter. As long as it's above 37 degrees, they'll still be out there looking. And recent research has shown that their adrenaline starts to pick up, or whatever the insect or arachnid equivalent of adrenaline is, so they get more energy because they're getting really desperate, and they're greater risk takers. So we're more likely to find these adult ticks in areas that we might not normally find them. So I did see before we started that somebody said, asked if she was safe on her wooden deck, and the answer to that is, yeah, probably, but there's the possibility that one of these adult ticks might find their way towards the house because they've got that last burst of energy, and they're really desperate, and they're going to go places where they might not normally. So depending on how close it is to good tick habitat, and we'll get into that soon, you might still be at risk. So what's happening during this time if they read the books and was doing the timing that they're supposed to? So in the summer, you've got these six-legged larvae, and they're going to feed on something. And typically, they're going to feed on small mammals. Mice, chipmunks, voles, shrews are some of their favorites. So they're going to feed for 4 days, then they're going to drop off, and they're just waiting it out in the leaf litter until it's time for them to feed again. So in the springtime, again, these poppy seed-sized nymphs, they're also going typically for a small mammal because it's down in the leaf litter where they are. And then when we get to the adults, they're going to be looking for something larger to feed on because now they're looking for their reproductive host. So they're going to be looking for a larger animal because that's going to increase the chances that they're going to find a mate and be able to finish their cycle. Now the risk comes when they're feeding on these small mammals because it's these small mammals that are hanging on to the pathogens. So mice, for example, these field mice, in some areas, including the Capital District, 95% of these mice might be carrying the pathogen that causes Lyme disease. About half of them could be carrying up to 3 pathogens, so Lyme plus some of the others. So when we think about protecting ourselves, when we're thinking about controlling ticks, we also really want to think about these small mammals as well. So the larvae are going to feed, and if the animal that they feed on is carrying these pathogens, they're going to take it in with their blood meal. It's now going to distribute through their bodies, and they're going to bring that to their next life stage, and now they're going to feed again. Now this is their second opportunity to feed on a host that is carrying some kind of pathogen. So we find that the adults, which have fed twice, are usually twice as likely to be carrying a pathogen than the nymph stage because they've only fed once. Having said that, we consider the nymph to be the most dangerous life stage because it is so small that unless you are actively protecting yourself, unless you're actively doing a tick check every day, you're not going to find it. And most people are going to come up with these tick-borne diseases in June and July because they might not have even known that they were bit by a tick because they're so small. So that really ups the ante in making sure that we protect ourselves, especially at this time. And it's not just Lyme disease. So black-legged ticks carry the pathogens that cause Lyme, anaplasmosis, babesiosis, Powassan virus, Borrelia miyamotoi, which is a relatively new one, and ehrlichiosis. Now, most of these are bacteria that live in the stomach of the tick, and when that blood meal hits, they wake up, they start to reproduce, and then they start moving through the body of the tick until they get to the salivary glands, where they then get injected as the tick is feeding. Powassan virus is distributed throughout the entire tick body, including the salivary glands. So with Powassan virus, that can be transmitted moments after full attachment of the tick. So again, that really ups the ante in just not getting bit by a tick at all. And Powassan virus also can be potentially fatal. So if you actually get sick from Powassan virus, there is a 10% chance of fatality. So I will say it's very rare. There's about 21 cases in North America itself, but it's definitely found in New York State. It's definitely found in the Capital Region. So it's one we really want to be careful of and make sure that we protect ourselves. Lone Star ticks carry their own host of pathogens, ehrlichiosis, the southern tick-associated rash illness, canine ehrlichiosis, tularemia, and we're still not sure whether it can transmit Rocky Mountain spotted fever. And then the American dog tick is also very quaint. It carries Rocky Mountain spotted fever, which is very rare in New York. So it's not one that we worry about too much. We're more worried about the pathogens transmitted by the black-legged tick. There's also some non-pathogenic impacts. So these are reactions that some people have to components of the saliva. So tick paralysis is something, again, it's very rare, but I just picked up an article yesterday where a child had this. And it's a paralysis that starts at the feet and it works its way up. And if it's not caught, it can actually shut down the respiratory system. So this is just something I want you to be aware of, that it can happen. And if somebody is experiencing this ascending paralysis, make sure that you look for a tick. And the great thing is once you remove the tick, the symptoms start to reverse. Also with the Lone Star tick, and this always gets people's attention, is this alpha-gal allergy. So this is alpha-gal is a carbohydrate that is found in every mammal except for primates, of course, we being primates. So the Lone Star tick is actually injecting this in with their saliva. And if you are prone to that allergy, that means that every further contact that you have with alpha-gal can cause you to have an allergic reaction, with every subsequent exposure getting worse and worse, up to anaphylactic shock. So when I'm talking to people like my young adult sons who are like, I'll just get treated for Lyme, learning that they might never be able to eat a hamburger again really gets their attention. All right. And they're committed. So once a tick gets on you, the adults can be on you for up to 7 days. And during this time, they're just ingesting. Once they get really full and they want to keep taking blood, because that's where the nutrients are, they're separating out the water out of the blood, and then they spit that back into you. So ticks were pretty much made to pass along these pathogens. And here's the promised close-up of the tick mouth parts. I like to show this because it indicates how far the tick gets embedded. And you can see that it's just this mouth part. And basically you want to think of this as a straw with barbs on it. So if, when you're removing the tick, it breaks off, only that mouth part is in there, so there's no salivary glands, it is no more dangerous than a splinter. So of course you want to try to remove the entire tick, but there's a lot of concern about leaving the head in. And you don't need to be concerned about that because you can't leave the head in because the head never gets inserted in the first place. And that might be the best news that I have for you today. And as I mentioned previously, they're not doing it alone. So here in New York, there's 27 different types of animals that ticks will feed on. In North America, there's 120. Down south, their favorite hosts are lizards. And these pathogens that affect us can't survive in the lizard body, which is one of the reasons that we have the Lyme disease issue up here, that they just don't have it down in the south. And not all hosts were created equal. So this mouse right here, as I said, most of them could be carrying the pathogens that cause Lyme. They could care less. They go on doing their mouse thing. Voles are not as popular, and partly is that they've got really small ears compared to the big honking ears of the mouse. So it's harder for the tick to find a place to be. Possums are now famous for eating a lot of ticks. They're immaculate groomers, so if they find ticks on them, they are likely to groom them off. I apologize for the fuzziness of this picture. I just took this at Five Rivers Environmental Education Center a couple of days ago, and the reason it's fuzzy is I had my telephoto lens and this rabbit came right up to me, and you can see the ticks that are just fully engorged on the back of its neck, or here are some engorged ticks on a bird. And then, as I mentioned, deer are their reproductive host. I also included guinea hens in here because there is a myth that if you get guinea hens or chickens, that it's going to take care of your tick problem, and it's just not true. They do eat ticks. They eat adult ticks. They're not going after the younger life stages. They're just too small for them to find. But they also get ticks, so it's a wash. They're really not making a difference. The research that people refer to happened in Africa, and that was the kind of tick that only fed on cattle, So when they released the guinea fowl into their pens, they ate the ticks off of the cattle, and it really reduced the tick population. No such luck. We've got 3 host ticks, or guinea hens are just as likely to be a meal as to make ticks into a meal. Now, where are people picking up ticks? There's been a couple of research studies done on this that really were married each other. One was in Connecticut, this one was in Maryland. 40% of people that know where they pick up the tick are finding them in their own backyards. So there's this idea that we're pretty safe in our own backyards. We're not. This is where most people are going to be getting their ticks. Only 18% of people are picking them up in parks or natural areas when they go out. And then, as I mentioned, they're very stealthy animals, so 25% of people don't know where they're getting it in the first place. So the ticks that are in our yards, most of them are going to be in wooded areas, in shady areas. Black-legged ticks really need pretty high humidity, around 85%, which is why you're unlikely to find them in the middle of your lawn. It's just too hot and dry. However, if you have a very shady lawn, then there is a likelihood that you can find them there. Only 3% of them were found in the turf grass in this particular study. And then for those that were found in the turf grass, 75% of them were found within 3 yards of the woodland edge, which makes sense because that's where it's going to be most humid. So don't discount the danger that is in your yard. Now this is black-legged ticks. I actually did a study down in Westchester County looking to see if mulching leaves into lawns impacted tick populations. And over the course of 4 years, I collected 65 ticks, which is not enough to actually answer my own question, but I do get to say I collected 65 ticks in the middle of very high-end Westchester lawns, but where I was most likely to find them were in these ornamental beds. This one happens to be Pachysandra. It's dense. Mice like to get in there for cover. So this is a high likelihood area for ticks to be. So you need to watch your ornamental beds. Lone star ticks, American dog ticks, and these Asian longhorn ticks are much hardier creatures. They don't need that high humidity level. So I just like to point out, this is in Rockland County, and this is an island that is not attached to the woodland. And I just walked across here with my companion, and we picked up a few hundred ticks each, just in this middle sunny area. So basically, just think that if you leave the pavement, that you're putting yourself in exposure for ticks. All right, so what are we going to do about it? You've got the triangle where the pathogen and the tick and the host form the basis of the triangle, with the local environment kind of supporting all of it. So things that we can do is change human behavior, reduce pathogen prevalence. That's partly, there's experiments with vaccinations now, getting out and trying to vaccinate mice, reducing pathogen transmission, altering the environment, controlling ticks, and controlling hosts. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about altering our environment. So we know that our yards can be high risk, so let's figure out where in your yard that is. And this is our very low-tech solution for doing tick management, where I use a square meter yard of flannel or corduroy because it's hardier. I stick a pole through it, got my rope, and I'm just slowly dragging this along. And if there are ticks that are out there questing, they're going to grab onto that white sheet. And that allows me to see where the ticks are in my yard. So where I would expect to find them, as I mentioned before, is going to be in this more forested area, or where the animals are. So stone walls, wood piles, these are mice condominiums. So like with wood piles, if you have the option, get them away from your house and put them into an area where people don't go very often, maybe just to go get wood for the wood pile. Putting fencing around your gardens, stopping the animals from coming in to feed in there and getting in there and dropping ticks off, which then exposes you. I hate to say it, I am a bird watcher. I used to have lots and lots of feeders, but having these feeders, bringing in these animals close to your house is just not a good idea anymore. So that's something that you might want to evaluate, whether it's worth a risk to you or not. Hummingbird bee feeders should be fine. They are very low risk of getting these ticks because they don't go down on the ground. So you have to have your bird feeder. There's safer ones, hummingbird feeders being one of them. And then you'll sometimes see this idea of putting in this barrier, whether it's mulch or whether it's stone, and somehow along the line it became, oh, the ticks aren't going to cross this barrier because it's too dry. This is changing human behavior. Having that mulch barrier there is letting people know that you're leaving the relatively safe area of your sunny lawn and you're entering the more risky, shady area that is the tick zone. So you can consider putting this up, especially if you have kids, and just letting them know that that's a barrier that it's more risky on the other side. And more recent research that showed that if we take leaves and we blow them into our woodland edge, where you've substantially increased the quality of that tick habitat, and we can find 3 times more ticks along that woodland edge than if we didn't blow those leaves in, or as we collected them and took them someplace else. So leaf piles, your leaf management is something to be concerned about. If you haven't already gotten around to cleaning up your lawns, these areas you would want to be extra careful to make sure that you're not exposing yourself to a tick risk. Let's talk about human behavior, because right now we know that this is the best way to protect yourself if you do it consistently. So one choice is to avoid these tick areas. So school athletic fields are relatively tick-free, but if the soccer ball rolls into the woodland edge, then there's that high risk. So trying to stay away from those areas if you're not prepared for it. If you're wearing your shorts and your sandals, you want to avoid those more tick-risky areas. So choosing where you're going to go for your walk. So from left to right, we go from the most tick-safe over to the most tick risky. Keeping in mind that if you're walking your dog on a leash, they're probably going to be deep into the tick habitat. So make sure that you're protecting your animals as well. I like to point this out because we can't let ticks cause us to give up the things that we love. So the path on the far right is a very tick risky area, but that leads to my favorite trout fishing hole. I'm not going to give that up. So avoid tick habitat if you can, but if you can't, here's the next steps that you're going to take. My favorite hobby is in the springtime is also taking pictures of spring ephemerals. So if you can name a more tick risky behavior than lying on your stomach in the middle of the woods, in springtime, I haven't heard it yet, but I can tell you that with these strategies, I have not been bitten by a tick in years. So one thing we're going to do is we're going to dress the part. So long pants tucked into socks. What that allows is that any ticks that get on us below our shin is going to have to crawl all the way up until they get to your waist before they can reach skin. If our shirt is tucked in, then they have to keep on going, and now it gets up to here before they can reach that skin area. This is a whole lot easier to look for ticks than some of those dark, moist places further down below. So we're basically sealing up that area to make it that ticks can't access that area. If we are doing things like taking pictures of flowers, then the long sleeves with tight cuffs are going to prevent them from crawling up your arms. All right. And while we are out there, we can also be looking for ticks. So this is a nymphal tick, size of a poppy seed, on my tick flag. So I like to show this. They're not really fast movers, but they're not slow either. So it might be unreasonable, especially as we get older, for me to say, hey, just look for ticks on crawling up your leg. But you might catch that movement if you just check yourself every once in a while, and the people that you're walking with. All right, now we want to up our game anymore. It's hot. We don't want to wear pants. Well, then there are repellents that you can apply to your skin. There are 4 products that have been proven to work against ticks, and that is DEET, picaridin, IR3535, which is the active ingredient in Skin So Soft, and oil of lemon eucalyptus. Repellents are pesticides. They have labels. We need to follow those labels. So they're going to tell you things like, don't apply to skin that's going to be covered by clothing. It's going to give you an indication of how long that repellent is going to last on your body. So make sure that you grab a magnifying glass, because the print is very, very small, and read that bottle and follow those directions carefully. Now what these do is this interferes with the tick's sense organ, so they no longer see you as a host. If we want to up our game anymore, we want to make sure that we protect our pets as well. So we're recommending that you have a conversation with your veterinarian on what the best tick repellent product they recommend for your particular pet. There are collars, there's the drops that you put behind the neck, there are ingestibles, there's pros and cons to all of them, so have that conversation with your vet. On the right-hand picture, that is my pinky with the first nymph that I found of the year, and I actually found it in my bed because it came in on my cat. That does have a collar on it, but when I checked after finding the tick, it had just expired. So got a new collar on the cat, and it's just another route that we can expose if we're not protecting our pets. All right, now we're gonna up our game even more. And research has shown that this by far is the best way to protect yourself. It's permethrin treated clothing. So permethrin is an insecticide that you can apply. You can buy a bottle and apply it to your clothes. Again, you're gonna wanna get out that magnifying lens and follow those directions. And they're gonna tell you to take the clothes outside. You're gonna spray it just until it gets, the color changes, and let it dry. And once it's dried, it has bound to the cloth, and it's going to stay there for 6 weeks or 6 washes, whichever comes first. So it's a set it and forget it method for tick protection. This is actually interfering with the neurological system, so they become disoriented, they can't climb, they can't bite, and after 5 minutes of exposure, they start dying. Permethrin has very low toxicity for most mammals. They actually can interfere with cats. However, that's only when it's in this concentrated form. So once it is bound to the cloth and it's dry, your cat can be in your lap. It is not going to affect them at all. So you can do it yourself. You can also buy pre-treated clothing or have your favorite outfits sent out to be professionally treated. This is a more concentrated version of it, so it can last for 70 washes or the lifetime of the garment. Again, you want to read the label because it's pesticides, and they're going to tell you that pre-treated clothing should be washed separately from your regular laundry. With the do-it-yourself method, it's not as concentrated, and you can just throw it in with everything else. And so this was an experiment where they put ticks on graduate students, and they were either not wearing treated clothing or they were wearing treated clothing. So this was summer weight clothing. They were wearing shorts, shoes, and you can see the attachments compared to the untreated clothing. We see a lot more ticks that we're able to attach than for these treated clothing. And you can see that most of the ones that were attached were where the clothing was not. So here's another reason to wear the long pants. But if you're wearing the treated clothing and you're wearing shorts, I would recommend that you also put a repellent on your skin. And this is just another reminder that you want to treat it with respect. You want to follow that label to make sure that you are doing what you need to do to keep yourself and the environment safe. You'd want to do this on a non-windy day. You'd want to do this on a hard surface, because if any of this gets onto dandelions, for example, if a bee came and visited, it would impact them. So you just want to be careful with this product because it is going to affect other insects. And once you're protected, you can go out, you can have your great time. When you come back, the recommendation is to take your clothes off. You're going to put it in the dryer, straight into the dryer, because ticks have been shown to survive the wash cycle and the dryer cycle. So if you put them straight in the dryer cycle to dry heat, they can't stand that. Get it up to 122 degrees, and it's going to kill any ticks that might still be in there. And now that your clothes are in the dryer, you are naked. So it is time to do your tick check. Best place to do this is the shower, because then you can get your hands nice and soapy. So you're not only using your eyes, but you can also, once your hands are soapy, just kind of feel along your body, see if there's any new bumps that weren't there before, looking for freckles. By the end of this, you should know every freckle, every skin tag, every new pimple that shows up, which is also good for, skin cancer screening. So 2 birds, 1 stone. And this is something that you should just make part of your everyday routine. Do it when you're brushing your teeth, because every day they're growing bigger. So if you miss that poppy seed nymph on day 1 or day 2, by day 2.5, they're getting larger, more likely for you to see them. And it's better for you to know and find that tick than to never find it at all. And then you get the summer flu, and oh my goodness, is it COVID-19 now? Do the tick check, know what your risk is. Just do it every single day. Now, if you do find one that's embedded, there's different ways of removing them, and there's lots of gadgets that are out there. If you don't do it correctly, this can cause issues. We want to consider ticks to be basically balloons filled with germs attached to your bloodstream by a straw. So if you squeeze it, if you irritate it, it causes it to salivate, which can push the pathogens in faster. So we want to treat the tick very, very gently. So absolutely no burning, no trying to suffocate it with petroleum jelly, no squeezing it. We want to use incredibly pointy tweezers. So these are the ones that I have, and this allows me to grab that tick right where the mouth part meets the skin, and we're going to just pull straight up to remove that tick. We have videos of tick removal on our website, which is www.don'tgettickedny.org. And then we want to identify it. Most of the time in this area, it's going to either be a black-legged tick or an American dog tick. But in the case if it's a Lone Star tick, then you were exposed to different pathogens. So that's information you want to be able to provide to your doctor. So if you can get a really good picture, close up, in focus, you can email that to me. And David, I don't know if you want to put that in the chat box. It's jkz6@cornell.edu. And we can do an identification for you and just be able to provide you with the information to provide to your doctor. Because each of these just carry different diseases. There's another very helpful app that will also identify ticks for you, and I highly recommend that you download this because it's not only providing you with information and reminders to do things like shower when you get home and do your daily tick check, but
David, what happened? We lost her. Are you there?
It looks like we lost Joellen.
Yeah. I wonder
Wow.
what happened.
I don't know.
Let's see if she signs back in. What was her email, though, just in case anybody wanted that?
I was just looking it up again.
We'll give her a few minutes. Maybe she'll log back in.
She was on a roll there, and she
Right.
something happened. Okay, Joellen's email. I'll type it in the chat box here. Let's see. Joellen's email is jkv6@cornell.edu. Okay. Well,
It is Z. It is Z. I thought you said, because I jotted it down, but I was like, Z? Oh.
yeah, I know it's not like it would normally be.
Right, right. I don't know if I should shoot her an email or see if she's trying to log back in.
Oh, here she comes.
There she is. Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
Okay.
There you are.
About that. So I lost my other computer. I'm on a different one, so I don't have my PowerPoint presentation, but I was almost done anyway. Basically, where was I? Oh, I was talking about the Tick app. So not only is that really helpful for reminding you about Tick information, but it's also a research project where they are looking at a Columbia University and they're looking at how our behaviors impact tick risk. So that is incredibly valuable information. So please, please, please consider participating in and downloading that app. And it can also help you with identification. My next slide was going to be talking about a different survey that I also encourage you to participate in, which is looking at tick risk in the age of COVID-19. So David, that link I actually had emailed to you. So if you could put that into the chat. And that's just basically talking about what exposures you have now that you might not have had before.
Okay, I think I've got that up there now, right? Oops.
Yes.
Yes, David, that's up there. Somebody asked for the Tick app.
So the Tick app is actually called the Tick app. I saw that in the chat box.
Okay, thanks.
And yeah, I can provide a link to that we can send out to all the registrants.
Okay, so
I gave you a lot of information. All of this can be found on don'tgetticknewyork.org. And please go outside. We need to be outside. Just if you take those precautions, your tick risk is going to be incredibly low.
yeah, I mean, there was an incredible amount of really good information there, Joellen. Thank you for all that. Every time I hear this presentation, I think I learn a lot. It's just amazing how much there is to know and a lot of details to it. Marcy, do we have questions in the chat box?
Someone asked what the ecotone, it says ecotone, question mark, question mark. So do you want to explain what that is?
Okay, so the ecotone is an area that is between two different ecosystem types. So in that particular slide, I was referring to the area where the forest was and then the area where your lawn is. So do you have ornamentals in between, kind of make it look nicer, or do you just have taller grass or a more weedy area? So it's kind of brings in some of the features of each ecosystem in that one strip where they meet.
Okay. Someone else is asking, saying that tick bodies are very hard and you can't step on them or squish them. So what is the best way to get rid of them?
Okay, don't flush them down your toilet because they have been known to come back.
Yikes.
They're amazing, amazing creatures. So we actually recommend that you hang on to it. Make sure that you have it properly identified. So when you remove a tick, you can put it into like a container that has alcohol in it, or you can stick it into a baggie and freeze it, because that will also kill them. And we recommend that you put the date that you removed it and also the body part that you removed it from, and just hang on to that for a month and a half. And if you don't start getting like flu-like symptoms, then you can probably at that point just discard it. At that point, you can flush it down the toilet.
Someone else is asking the name of the Tick app, and it is just that. It's the Tick app, right? That's exactly what it's called?
Yes.
The Tick app? Okay.
The Tick app.
The Tick app. I can do that when I'm done reading these questions. Excellent presentation. Do you recommend the pronged tick twister or not?
So they can work if you use them correctly. So the idea behind a lot of these gadgets is that you've got a V, and the idea is that you're going where the tick is attached to the skin, you're getting that V right in there. So if you can do that, good on you. Really hard to do with the small nymph. And then you're going to lift it straight up. We don't recommend any twisting. So one is making sure that you use that properly. But even with the tweezers, you have to make sure you're getting it right where the skin meets the mouth part. The other problem with those other gadgets is that, because I tested them when I took one off my husband using that, I was like, oh, that was really kind of easy. And then I went to put it into a plastic bag and it dropped off. So now I'm on my floor looking for this tick that I had just removed. When I have it in the tweezers, then I have it until I let it go. So my recommendation is if you want to use those other gadgets, go ahead, just be very careful. And I also recommend that you do it in the bathtub, that if it falls, it's really easy to find.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea. I've heard that taking vitamin B1 will deter tick bites. Any truth to that?
B1. There's no evidence, which is what we provide at Cornell. So research hasn't found that out, and I don't know, it's not worth the risk. So take all the vitamin D you want, not too much, according to your doctor. But don't count on it. Do not count on it to keep you from getting a bit bad tick.
Someone says, my neighbor told me about a way to remove a tick by taking a soapy cotton ball and turning it counterclockwise on the top of the tick to unscrew the tick. I tried it, worked, but question mark.
Right. So if you think that might irritate you being turned around, then you probably shouldn't do it to a tick, because irritated ticks salivate. So really the consensus is that the pointy tweezers pulling straight up is the best way to remove them.
I live in the woods and have a lot of leaves. In fall, I blow them into the woods. Will blowing them help get them away from my yard? So will the ticks stay in the leaves and not come into the yard?
So yes, but that's also going to create better habitat right there at that woodland edge or the ecotone, because now you've got this pile of leaves that's in between your lawn and the woods themselves. So I'm actually hoping to get funding for a research project looking at blowing versus mulching versus having them taken away, and seeing how that impacts the tick population. Because that one study that I mentioned did not look at mulching the leaves.
Looks like someone is looking for the app for us, and sorry, it's moving. The Play Store has the Tick app from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Is this the one?
That is the one, yes.
Okay, perfect.
They're partnering with Columbia University in New York City.
People are saying you're great. Why isn't there people. Why isn't there draft for people like there are for pets?
Okay, so I love this question. There are. It's called permethrin treated clothing. So yeah, people wanted like, can I just strap Seresto collars around my ankles? And that's going to do it. Well, the way that that works is that it distributes that over the entire body, and it kind of gets into the skin oils of the animal. Well, we're showering every day, or we shower. So we would be washing that product off. So it's not dispersing. So just strapping that onto your ankles isn't going to give the ticks the exposure that's going to make a difference. That's what permethrin treated clothing is for.
Okay. David, somebody says that the same person that said that she was great said that you and I are great too. They didn't want us to.
She is right.
That's right. What about compost piles?
So that would be an area that I would get out my trusty tick flag and look around to see if it is. I would definitely recommend that your compost pile be rodent proof to discourage mice and rats from living in there, because they could be hosts for the ticks.
Okay. And after removing a tick, should you contact your doctor? You have it now, you have it off you and you have it in the plastic bag, but do you contact your doctor?
This is a conversation you should actually have with your doctor next time that you go for your physical, whenever we'll be allowed to do that again. But I think it's a really good idea to have it put in the record, and every doctor is different. So some are wait and see people, some are, I want to give you a prophylactic. So it's like one dose of an antibiotic. Different people do different things. So have that conversation with your physician.
Okay. And someone else is asking, so one of the recommendations you made was Skin So Soft. So you're saying that's as good as the other sprays? That's one that you recommend?
So it is one of the ones that has been proven. Make sure that you read that bottle. And we find that DEET and picaridin, the higher the concentration, typically the longer it lasts, with 3 hours, with 30% being about the best benefit you're going to get. So going above that is not recommended. So, so it can work. There was actually, it was supposed to go into effect, and then it got knocked off of the regulatory thing, that it was supposed to tell you how long it was going to last. And so that's no longer something that's required on these. So that's something you just want to explore. So I mentioned oil of lemon eucalyptus. That works, but it works for an hour. So if you're not going to apply it every hour, then that's just not the repellent for you. I don't know how long IR 3535 lasts.
Okay.
I'm a permethrin treated clothing person. It's just the best way to protect myself.
Right. Right. In the fall, occasionally mice come into my kitchen. Anything to do about the ticks? Is there a worry about the ticks there?
So if they come in on the mice, then they are not going to be on the mice for very long. Typically, it's going to be the younger life stages that are going to drop off in 3 to 4 days. And then your house is too dry for them to survive. If your house is 85% humidity, then you've got way bigger issues than whether ticks are going to be surviving in there or not. Now, areas where they could survive for a while includes your laundry basket. If you have hot, sweaty clothes and you drop your clothes in there, then there's enough moisture there for them to last for a while, which is why there's the recommendation for putting them straight into the dryer.
Okay. What do you think about tick tubes? Tubes stuffed with perithium soaked cotton balls. Mice are supposed to take the cotton for their nest and will kill the ticks. Okay, so they take the cotton back to their, and then it kills the ticks.
There's a few products that are like that are just fascinating, and they can work really, really well unless they don't. And some of the reasons that they wouldn't is, let's say in your particular area, you don't have a lot of mice, you have a lot of chipmunks. So chipmunks don't collect the cotton, so it's going to have no impact on them at all. Also, if you have a mature mouse population that already have their nests all settled in and nicely leafed to their desire, then there isn't a lot of incentive for them to be gathering that cotton. So it's, if you know that you have mice, it's definitely worth trying, and we talk about that on our webpage. And it's definitely more targeted than just a basic spraying of the yard, much less impact on non-target species.
Okay. Are tick gaiters any better than tall socks over pants?
No, you're going to get the same effect.
Okay. Are chipmunks groomers? Are chipmunks groomers?
I don't know. I'm going to leave it at that. I don't know.
Yeah. Asked by one of our very own master gardeners. How long should you run the dryer to kill any ticks?
It's going to depend on your dryer. So the best way to figure that out is to take a bunch of towels and throw it in the dryer, and then leave it in for 15 minutes, and then check the temperature with the meat thermometer. If it's 122 degrees, then it's 15 minutes. If it's 119 degrees, then throw it in for another 5 minutes. So,
okay. So we're
dryer.
get to that 122.
Right.
All right. Do socks need to be tight weave or tall?
So, tight weaver. I will say that larvae can get through loosely weaved socks because they are so incredibly small, especially Lone Star ticks. And when they come, that's something we're going to have to worry about. So as long as they're tall enough to cover, that you can tuck your pants in them, then that's long enough. If you are wearing shorts and you're wearing permethrin treated socks, then the taller that those socks are, the longer the ticks are going to be exposed to permethrin, and the more likely it is to affect them.
Okay, that looks like that's all the questions in our chat box.
Wow, that was a workout.
Yeah. Woo!
And you will not believe how much information I took out of my presentation.
I know. It's just amazing. I want to say really a very sincere thank you to Joellen, because I've worked for Cooperative Extension for a long, long time. And for many years, we didn't have very good tick resources at all. And since Joellen has been with us doing this tick project, it's just like we have this incredible resource now for the whole state. We have a lot of great information. It's just a really valuable program and project that she's working on. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate that, but I also want to make sure that this is not my work alone. We have 2 PhD entomologists that also work on this project. Our recently retired Lynn Braben. This was really a group effort, and we had all of our materials vetted by tick researchers across the Northeast. So it was definitely a group project.